Some people in the comments section have been asking me whether I intend to represent myself in court rather than use a lawyer. Well, the strange thing is that I have actually done this before. I have experience in this area because way back in 1982, some animosity existed between me and a school colleague, I was obviously out of school by this time, but this fellow had been in school with me, and there was no love lost, as they say. Anyway, I was at a disco in Stornoway. We used to have these things back in the day, and was crossing the dance floor and saw my adversary heading in in the opposite direction, directly towards me. I thought to myself, well, I'm not going to move out of his way. And I suppose he must have thought the same thing. Anyway, there was a coming together, to cut a long story short. And, well, he ended up getting the worst of it because he was the one that ended up on the floor. But it's not as if he was badly beaten up or anything. I mean, it was over fairly quickly, and I just went on my way. But some characters from my company decided that they were going to continue with this and beat him up some more. Now, the police were called. The whole thing went to court, and I ended up in the dock alongside another companion of mine at the time, known as Colin Cream Eggs. We were both but teenagers. I was all of 18. Now, he would have probably been 17. But he had the good sense to use a lawyer. Somebody had probably given him sound advice and along those lines. But I, in my brash, youthful confidence, chose to represent myself. So, I played the part of the celebrity lawyer, impressing my friends in the gallery, who thought it was hilarious. Cross-examining the witnesses, including the man that I fought with. Suffice it to say that the judge took a dim view of this. And when it came to sentencing, Colin Cream Eggs walked free. Whatever sentence he was given, I don't remember. But I myself, well, he saved me to the end. And I had to stand before the judge and hear the words, 3 months detention centre training starting from this date. Excuse me? What? I could hardly believe my ears. So very quickly I found myself in a place called Glenoakle Detention Centre, which was based at, it was right next to a place called Young Offenders, Glenoakle Young Offenders Institution in the Oakhill Hills. And my first impression of that place was quite bleak, because I remember the first I remember seeing these people marching around in silence with their heads down, or well, some were marching, being drilled, some were sweeping, mopping floors, sweeping, doing these kind of tasks, menial tasks, with their heads down, very busy, not speaking to anyone, with real short crew cuts, bib and braces, prison shirts, their dungarees tucked into these big leather buckled gaiters and over big army boots, which were extremely shiny. Everything very shiny and creased. Nobody talking. The only people speaking were the wardens, or the screws as they were known as. And they weren't talking, they weren't just speaking, they were yelling, barking out orders, and everybody would just snap to attention and instantly obey. So that place was all, I mean, my first greeting from one of the warders on the wing was in my new cell. I was standing to attention in my brand new cell. And this really big guy, I mean, he couldn't have been far off. To me, he seemed like about almost 7 foot tall. He was really big. And he asked me what I was in for. And I said, I had to stand to attention. Assault, sir. And he gave me a firm, good punch in the stomach, which knocked the wind right out of me, and I ended up on the floor wheezing for breath, doubled up kind of thing. And he then asked me, or said, I've just assaulted you. What are you going to do about it? Of course I wasn't going to do anything about it. But that's the kind of place it was. The warders had a free rein to abuse you as they saw fit. It was nothing to see people getting hauled around by the hair, punched, slapped, kicked, whatever. I saw it all. You know, we had to do lots of PT, running around daft and circuit training and all the rest of it. Meal times were ridiculous. All marched to the canteen, and having to stand to attention round the tables, and then they'd bark out the order to sit, and you'd have to grab the chair, whip the chair out with one hand, stick it under your backside and sit down and wait. Well, I think then you could then instantly start eating your food, and it was really funny. There was one guy who I remember, he'd be sitting in front of me at the table, and it was like a hamster. You see, you had very limited, your time was limited, the time you had to eat your food. And you were really hungry because you were so active. You were really hungry. And this guy who's like a hamster, his cheeks really packed full with food, he'd be shoveling and shoveling and shoveling. And there would be this big pot of tea in the middle of the table. And it was typical prison tea, in those days anyway. I don't know what you get now, but a big pot of tea, you know, already mixed with milk and so on, and you just had to fill up your cup with it, that was it. And I used to wonder, wow, how can he eat so fast? Because, you know, I knew you had to eat fast, and or, you know, you wouldn't get enough food into you. But I figured it out that this guy was taking lots of slurps of tea with his food. So there was lots of lubrication and he could get it down fast. So I learned from watching him, from observing him, that how to eat fast, how to get lots of food into yourself fast. And to this day I've never forgotten that. But, well, I don't obviously do that, eat like that now, but while it was in there, it served me to do that. So anyway, that's what it was like. Nutty place. Spent the best part of 3 months there, running around daft, getting screamed and bawled at, treated terribly. But one thing it did to, you know, we used to have to go to bed at 9. I think it was 9 o'clock in the evening. We went to bed and got up at 5:30 in the morning. An alarm bell, like a fire alarm bell, ding, ling, 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 really loud, would wake you out of your skin. at 5:30 in the morning, and it was still dark, and you'd be up and about, and you couldn't stand on your floor. You had to polish your floor all the time. You had to stand on cloths in case you made the slightest mark on your floor, because you're always getting inspected and everything. So it was like sort of severe army training, but at the end of it all, when you got out, you were fit and kind of sharp. Your brain was kind of sharp. You were kind of aware of everything, and you were fitter. You were fitter, and you were kind of more awake and everything. But anyway, that was what that was like. And when I got to Ullapool, there was a force 11 storm over the Minch, and the ferry was doing circles in Loch Broom for a while, and they were wondering whether they were going to actually attempt the crossing because it was so rough. And today they would just have binned it. They just wouldn't even have thought twice about attempting to cross. But in those days they were a bit more robust, shall we say, in their approach to things. Anyway, I remember being on the ferry and hearing the captain's voice coming over the tannoy, and he was clearly a Lewis man. "Hello, this is your captain speaking. It's a bit rough, but we'll give it a go anyway, and let's just hope we make it." I remember thinking, oh, maybe you should just drop me off. I mean, it was bad enough in Loch Broom, let alone the thought of the Minch itself. But anyway, normally in those days the journey took 3.5 hours, but it took 7.5 hours this time. I remember the toilets, all the sinks, all the urinals, all the toilets full of vomit. The tiled floor in the toilets, it was all over the floor. Everybody I saw on the ferry was green with sickness, and I was sick. I just felt terrible the whole time. I think everybody did, except for the crew. The crew were the only ones that didn't seem to be bothered by it. I mean, I spent my time outside, hanging onto the rail outside, puking over the side of the boat. And the whole point of me standing outside there was if the boat capsized, which I expected it to do at any moment, I could maybe somehow crawl my way up onto the bottom of the hull, because the thing would be upside down, and maybe I would survive. But anyway, that was my worst ever experience on a boat. And the first time that I'd prayed since I was very young, because I was afraid of death. And it's quite amazing how perceived proximity to death and eternity will alter your whole perception of eternity and God. It is. It's quite fascinating. Very interesting. So to cut a long story short, that was my experience of defending myself in court. So here's the question: should I do the same now? Let me know in the comments.